The clink of expensive crystal and the murmur of polite conversation filled the dimly lit restaurant, where I'd been working double shifts for the past 3 weeks. My feet ached inside the mandatory black heels, and the stiff collar of my white button-down shirt chafed against the back of my neck. The air was heavy with the scent of truffle oil and aged whiskey. Smells that once seemed exotic but had become the background noise of my exhaustion. "Emily, table 7 needs their check, Marco," the floor manager hissed as he breezed past me, not bothering to wait for my acknowledgement. I nodded anyway, balancing 3 plates of deconstructed tiramisu along my forearm. The desserts cost more than what I made in 4 hours of work. Such was life at Tesoro, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city, where the wealthy came to be seen, and the desperate, like me, came to serve them. "Yes, beautiful, thank you," purred an older gentleman as I set the delicate dessert before him. His eyes lingered on my collarbone while his wife stared intently at her phone. I'd perfected the art of the polite smile that revealed nothing, especially not how much I needed their generous tip to make this month's rent. 6 more hours. Just 6 more hours until I could collapse into my bed in the tiny apartment I shared with my roommate, who I barely saw because of our opposing work schedules. 6 more hours of smiling through the exhaustion, of being invisible yet scrutinized, of being everywhere yet nowhere. That's when I felt it. The shift in the atmosphere. The restaurant's ambient chatter dipped, before resuming at a slightly higher, more alert pitch. The maitre d', usually unflappable, straightened his already impeccable posture. Even Marco, perpetually unimpressed, suddenly appeared by the entrance, hands clasped before him like a choir boy. I didn't need to look to know someone important had arrived. Tesoro catered to the elite, but there were clearly tears even among them. I continued serving, keeping my head down. The wealthy were like wild animals. They sensed attention and fear, and I couldn't afford to make mistakes tonight. "The Castellano party," I heard Marco whisper to another server as he passed. "Private room. Vincent and Sophia only." The name sent a chill down my spine. Everyone in the city knew of the Castellano family, even if no one spoke of them directly. "Old money," they said in public. "Something much darker," they whispered in private. Dominic Castellano's name was both revered and feared, attached to countless businesses across the city. Some legitimate, many rumored not to be. I'd never seen him in person, but his reputation loomed large enough that even the mention of his family name made the air feel thinner. I delivered desserts, processed payments, and navigated the floor with practiced precision, all while catching glimpses of the commotion surrounding the private dining room. Men in dark suits with earpieces stood at strategic points near the kitchen and main entrance. The staff moved with a nervous energy, like ants sensing rain. 3 hours into my shift, as the main dinner rush began to ebb, Marco appeared at my elbow. "Emily, I need you to take over the private room," he said, his voice tight. "The Castellano room? I thought Vincent and Sophia were handling that." "Sophia's sick. Food poisoning or something. Vincent can't manage alone." His eyes darted toward the back of the restaurant. "Just be invisible, efficient, and for God's sake, don't make conversation." My heart hammered against my ribs as I nodded. The private room meant better tips, but it also meant higher stakes. One mistake and I could lose this job. A job I desperately needed since my mother's medical bills had started piling up. I checked my appearance in the mirrored wall of the service station, straightening my shirt, tucking loose strands of auburn hair back into my tight bun, pinching my cheeks for color. Then I gathered my courage and headed toward the private dining room. Vincent met me in the narrow hallway, his face pale with stress. "There's Mr. Castellano, his son Antonio, and 3 associates," he whispered, handing me a tray of empty cocktail glasses. "They're finishing appetizers and moving to main courses. Just follow my lead." I nodded, following him into the room. The private dining area was separated from the main restaurant by heavy velvet curtains and a solid oak door. Inside, the lighting was even dimmer, casting long shadows across the hand-painted murals of the Italian countryside. The central table was round, covered in crisp white linen, and surrounded by 5 men. No, 4 men and 1 boy, perhaps 10 or 11 years old. I kept my eyes downcast as Vincent introduced me in a hushed tone, but I could feel the weight of their gazes assessing me. I began clearing glasses with practiced efficiency, moving around the table like a ghost. "And then Moretti says he can't make the payment until next week," one of the men was saying, his voice dropping as I approached. The conversation shifted seamlessly to talk of wine and the unseasonably cool weather. That's when I first saw him, not directly, but in fragments. Polished Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary, a platinum watch that caught the light as he reached for his water glass, a tailored charcoal suit that draped perfectly over broad shoulders, a glimpse of olive skin and the edge of a strong jaw shadowed with precisely maintained stubble. Dominic Castellano sat at the head of the table, his back to the wall, facing the door. The position of a man who never wanted to be surprised. Even seated, his presence commanded the room. He spoke little, but when he did, everyone leaned slightly forward, hanging on each carefully chosen word. The boy, Antonio, I presumed, sat to his right, fidgeting with his napkin and looking thoroughly bored. He had his father's features, but softened, his eyes wider and more curious, his small frame drowning in what looked like a custom-made suit. "Dad, can I have my phone back?" the boy asked during a lull in conversation. "Not during dinner, Antonio," Dominic replied, his voice unexpectedly gentle yet firm. He had a slight accent that rounded his vowels. Not the exaggerated Italian-American inflection of movies, but something more authentic, as if English was a language he'd mastered rather than inherited. I moved around the table, serving their main courses, osso buco for Dominic, pasta for the boy, various specialties for the others. The men continued their conversation, now veering into topics of property acquisitions and construction delays. While the boy pushed his food around the plate with growing restlessness, the door to the private room opened, admitting a loud burst of laughter from the main restaurant. A man stumbled in, clearly intoxicated, his expensive suit rumpled and his tie askew. "There you are, Dom. Been looking all over," the drunk man slurred, ignoring the sudden tension that electrified the room. The security personnel moved forward, but Dominic raised a hand slightly, stopping them. "Robert?" Dominic acknowledged coolly. "This is a private dinner." "Private? Schmiveta?" Robert laughed, weaving slightly as he approached the table. "Since when do you exclude old friends? We've known each other since college, for Christ's sake." I continued serving silently, hyper-aware of the shifting dynamics in the room. The other diners had gone rigid, while the security men hovered at the edges, awaiting direction. Antonio looked up from his pasta, eyes wide with curiosity at the interruption. "You've had too much to drink," Dominic said, his voice calm but edged with something that made the hair on my arms stand up. "One of my men will drive you home. We'll talk tomorrow." Robert's face darkened. "Still so high and mighty, aren't you? Dominic Castellano, the untouchable." He spat the words, taking another unsteady step forward. "You know what people say about you, what they whisper behind your back?" I moved to the side of the room, trying to make myself invisible while remaining within serving distance. Vincent had disappeared, probably to get reinforcements or give them privacy for whatever was about to unfold. "Not in front of my son," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. He nodded almost imperceptibly to one of his men. "Your son!" Robert laughed bitterly. "Teaching him the family business already? How to threaten, how to intimidate?" He swung his arm wildly as he spoke, sending a full glass of red wine flying across the table. I gasped as the crimson liquid arced through the air, heading straight for Antonio. What happened next was pure instinct. I lunged forward, positioning myself between the flying wine and the boy. The cold liquid splashed across my white shirt and black pants, instantly soaking through to my skin. A few drops spattered against my face, and I felt one slide down my cheek like a bloody tear. The room went deathly silent. I stood there, dripping with Barolo that probably cost more than my weekly salary, mortified by my impulsive action. My career flashed before my eyes. This job I so desperately needed, gone because I couldn't maintain the professional invisibility required. Robert stared at me in drunken confusion. The security personnel tensed, awaiting direction. Antonio's eyes were wide with surprise. And Dominic Castellano, I finally looked at him directly, was studying me with an intensity that made my breath catch. His eyes were dark, nearly black in the dim lighting, set in a face that belonged on ancient Roman currency, all sharp angles and commanding presence. There was something unnervingly calm in his expression, like the stillness of deep water. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, reaching for my serving cloth to mop at the spreading stain. "I'll get cleaned up and bring fresh napkins immediately." "Wait," Dominic's voice stopped me as effectively as a physical barrier. He turned to the drunk man, who seemed to suddenly realize the gravity of his actions. "Robert, it's time for you to leave." Two security men materialized at Robert's sides, gripping his elbows firmly. "This isn't over, Dominic," Robert growled, but the threat sounded hollow as he was escorted from the room. The door closed behind them, and I stood frozen, wine dripping from my ruined uniform, acutely aware that every eye in the room was now on me. "What's your name?" Dominic asked, his attention fully focused on me for the first time. "Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Emily Foster. You protected my son," he stated, as if cataloging an unexpected phenomenon. I swallowed hard. "It was just a reflex, sir. I'm sorry for the disruption." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't apologize for that." He studied me for a moment longer, then reached into his jacket and extracted a sleek leather wallet. My stomach twisted. Was he going to offer me money, pay me off for witnessing the uncomfortable scene? Instead, he removed a business card and held it out to me. "Go get cleaned up. Then call this number. Tell Marco I said you're finished for tonight." I hesitated before taking the card, hyper-aware of my wine-stained fingers nearly touching his. The card was heavy, minimalist, just his name, and a phone number embossed in dark ink. "But my shift is over," he finished firmly. It wasn't a suggestion. Antonio was looking between his father and me with open curiosity. "She was really fast, Dad," he said, sounding impressed, like a superhero or something. A ghost of a smile touched Dominic's lips as he looked at his son. "Yes, she was." I clutched the card, uncertain what was happening. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano, but I can't just leave in the middle of—" "You can and you will," he interrupted smoothly. "Your manager will understand." The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. This was clearly a man accustomed to having his every word obeyed without question. "Go home. Get some rest," he continued, his eyes returning to mine with unsettling focus. "Someone will contact you." A chill ran through me despite the warm restaurant. Contact me? For what? Was this a good thing or a terrible one? I couldn't tell from his expression, which revealed nothing beyond calm authority. "Thank you again," I said inadequately, backing toward the door. As I turned to leave, I heard Antonio ask, "Why was Uncle Robert so angry?" "Some men can't handle their alcohol," Dominic replied, "or their failures." I slipped out of the room, my heart pounding, Dominic's business card clutched in my trembling hand. The heavy door closed behind me, sealing the Castellanos back in their private world. I leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. Marco found me there a moment later, his eyes widening at the state of my uniform. "What happened?" he demanded. "There was an incident with a drunk guest," I explained. "Mr. Castellano said I'm finished for tonight. He insisted." Marco's face cycled through several emotions: anger, fear, calculation, and finally resignation. "Of course. Whatever Mr. Castellano wants," he lowered his voice. Is everything okay, Emily?" The genuine concern in his voice surprised me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. "Go change. I'll have your tips from tonight ready when you come out." In the staff bathroom, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, pale face spattered with wine droplets, ruined uniform clinging to my skin. The business card sat on the edge of the sink, Dominic Castellano's name staring up at me like a challenge or a warning. I had no idea which. What had I just stumbled into? And more importantly, how was I going to get out of it? As I changed into my street clothes, I couldn't shake the memory of Dominic's eyes, calculating, intense, and filled with something I couldn't name. Something that made me feel simultaneously threatened and protected. Something that told me, with absolute certainty, that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't begin to imagine. And I had no idea if I should be terrified or thrilled by that prospect. Block 2. The next morning, I woke to the harsh buzz of my phone vibrating against my nightstand. Sunlight filtered through the cheap blinds of my bedroom, casting striped shadows across my rumpled sheets. For a blissful moment, I forgot about the previous night's events, until my eyes landed on the business card propped against my lamp. Dominic Castellano's name seemed to pulse with its own energy, a silent reminder of the strange encounter. I grabbed my phone, expecting to see Marco's name, probably calling to fire me, but instead, an unknown number flashed on the screen. My heart skipped as I answered. Hello? Ms. Foster. It wasn't a question. The voice was female, crisp and professional. A car will arrive at your address in 1 hour. Please be ready. A car? Who is this? What for? I sat up, clutching my thin comforter to my chest as if the caller could see me. Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you. She paused, then added with slight impatience, the address we have is 1742 Westmore Avenue, apartment 3B. Is this correct? A chill ran down my spine. How did they know where I lived? I had never given my address to anyone at the restaurant except HR. Yes, but 1 hour, Ms. Foster. Professional attire is appropriate. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Professional attire? I was a waitress, not a business executive. My professional wardrobe consisted of black pants with subtle food stains and button-down shirts from the clearance rack. My roommate Rachel was already gone for her early hospital shift, so I had no one to consult about this surreal situation. I showered quickly, my mind racing through possibilities. Was this about a job? Compensation for the ruined uniform? Or something more sinister? The rumors about the Castellano family's connections to organized crime suddenly felt less like urban legends and more like warnings. After trying on and discarding 3 outfits, I settled on my interview clothes. A navy pencil skirt that was slightly too tight after the holidays, a cream blouse with only one barely noticeable coffee stain on the cuff, and my 1 pair of decent heels. I pulled my hair back into a neat ponytail, applied minimal makeup, and checked the time. 58 minutes had passed since the call. Right on cue, my phone pinged with a text. Your car has arrived. I peered through the window blinds. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows idled at the curb, looking comically out of place in my working-class neighborhood. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, stood by the rear door, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my purse, tucked the business card inside, and headed downstairs. Ms. Foster. The driver nodded as I approached. His expression was carefully neutral, but I caught him assessing me with a quick professional glance that seemed to catalog every detail of my appearance. He opened the rear door. Please. The car's interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne. The windows were tinted so dark that once inside, the morning sunlight dimmed to twilight. As we pulled away from my apartment building, I clutched my purse on my lap, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. Where are we going? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The driver's eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. Mr. Castellano's office. And where is that exactly? Downtown, 30 minutes in this traffic. He offered nothing more, and I didn't press. Instead, I watched the city transform around us as we moved from my neighborhood of dollar stores and laundromats to the gleaming financial district with its mirrored skyscrapers reaching toward the clouds. We eventually stopped before an elegant limestone building with understated brass lettering that read Castellano Investments. No flashy signs or ostentatious displays of wealth, just quiet, confident power. The driver opened my door. 35th floor. They're expecting you. Inside, the lobby was all marble and mahogany, with a security desk manned by 2 guards who looked more military than civilian. One nodded to me. Ms. Foster, elevator B, please. It's ready for you. The private elevator required no button pushing. It ascended smoothly, its only indication of movement the subtle pressure change in my ears. When the doors opened, I stepped into a reception area where a striking woman in her 40s sat behind a desk that could have been carved from a single piece of ebony. Ms. Foster, she greeted me, standing. Her voice confirmed she was the caller from earlier. "I'm Vanessa, Mr. Castellano's executive assistant. This way, please." She led me through a space of understated luxury, original artwork on the walls, plush carpet underfoot, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city I served tables in, but rarely saw from this height. Several people worked at desks in an open area, all of them looking up briefly as I passed. Their expressions were curious but carefully controlled. "Mr. Castellano is concluding a call," Vanessa explained as we approached a set of double doors at the end of the hallway. "Can I offer you water, coffee?" "Water, please," I managed, my throat suddenly dry. She nodded, opening one of the doors to reveal a spacious waiting area outside what I presumed was Dominic's office. "Please sit. He won't be long." Left alone, I perched on the edge of a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car. Through the partially open inner door, I could hear the low murmur of Dominic's voice, something about shipping containers and customs clearance. I tried not to listen, focusing instead on the view and wondering what on earth I was doing here. Vanessa returned with water in an actual glass, not plastic, with a slice of lemon. As I sipped, the inner door opened fully, and Dominic Castellano emerged. In daylight, he was even more imposing than he had been in the dim restaurant. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to commanding any space he entered. His suit today was navy blue, impeccably tailored to his athletic frame. His dark hair was styled back from his forehead, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face and those eyes, intense and watchful, missing nothing. "Ms. Foster," he said, his voice as I remembered it, deep, with that hint of an accent. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." I stood quickly, nearly spilling my water. Did I have a choice? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, but Dominic's lips curved into what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Everyone has choices," he replied. "Please, come in." His office was surprisingly understated for a man of his wealth and reputation. The furniture was elegant but not ostentatious, the art on the walls selected for quality rather than shock value. One wall was entirely glass, offering a commanding view of the city and harbor beyond. "Sit, please." He gestured to one of two chairs positioned before his desk. I sat, setting my water glass on a coaster that materialized beneath it as if by magic. Dominic didn't take his seat behind the desk as I expected. Instead, he chose the chair beside mine, turning it slightly to face me. The move felt deliberately casual, but there was nothing relaxed about his presence. "How's your uniform?" he asked, surprising me with the question. "Ruined," I admitted. "Red wine doesn't come out easily." He nodded as if confirming something to himself. "I've arranged for its replacement and compensation for your dry cleaning." "That's very thoughtful." I hesitated. "But unnecessary. Is that why I'm here?" "No." He studied me with those dark, assessing eyes. "You're here because you did something unusual last night. You put yourself between danger and my son." I shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "It wasn't danger, Mr. Castellano. Just wine." "Nevertheless, your instinct was to protect, not withdraw. That interests me." The way he said interests made it sound like more than casual curiosity. I forced myself to meet his gaze. "I work with children sometimes, younger siblings of customers. It was just reflex." "Do you have children, Ms. Foster?" "No." "Family in the city?" I hesitated, unsure why he was asking. "My mother. She's unwell." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. "I see." He leaned back slightly. "Tell me about yourself, Emily. Your work at Tesoro. Is it your only job?" The casual use of my first name didn't escape me. "I also work part-time at a catering company on weekends, and I'm taking online classes in business administration." "Ambitious." "Necessary," I corrected. "Medical bills don't pay themselves." He nodded, as if I'd confirmed something. "What happened to your mother?" I bristled slightly at the personal question, but found myself answering anyway. "Early onset Alzheimer's. She's in a care facility now. Insurance covers some, but I trailed off, unwilling to detail my financial struggles to this man who probably spent more on his watch than I made in a year." "And your father?" Gone. Since I was 12. I straightened my spine slightly. Mr. Castellano, I appreciate the concern for your son's almost stained shirt, but why am I really here? For a moment, I thought I'd crossed a line. His expression remained impassive, but something sharpened in his gaze. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a small, genuine curve of his lips that transformed his face from intimidating to almost approachable, direct. Good. He stood, moving to the window. I have a proposition for you, Emily, a job offer. A job? Of all the scenarios I'd imagined, this wasn't one of them. What kind of job? Antonio needs a tutor. He turned back to face me. He's struggling with English literature and composition. His teachers report he's falling behind. I blinked in confusion. Mr. Castellano, I'm not a teacher. I'm a waitress with half a business degree. You're also someone who instinctively protected my son without thought to yourself. Someone who works 2 jobs while caring for an ill parent and pursuing education. His eyes held mine. I value character over credentials, Ms. Foster. But surely there are qualified tutors. Many. None I trust. The way he said trust carried the weight of a man who had learned its value through bitter experience. Antonio liked you. He mentioned you twice after you left. I was speechless. This couldn't be happening. The most powerful man in the city wanted me, a nobody waitress, to tutor his son. The position pays $3,000 a week, he continued casually, as if he hadn't just named a figure that was more than quadruple my current monthly income. 4 hours daily, Monday through Friday at my home, transportation provided, of course. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's excessive for tutoring. Not when it includes a confidentiality agreement and the inconvenience of background checks and security protocols. He walked back to stand near my chair. Your mother's medical care would also be transferred to private specialists. Fully covered. My heart stuttered. What? I've taken the liberty of reviewing her case. The facility she's in is adequate, but there are better options. He said this as if reviewing a stranger's medical care was the most natural thing in the world. Dr. Savarin at the Neurological Institute has an excellent program. He has agreed to take her case. Anger flared through my shock. You investigated my mother? That's invasive? Yes. He didn't look remotely apologetic. I investigate everyone who comes near my son, Ms. Foster, and if I say no to your offer? His expression didn't change. Then you say no. The offer regarding your mother stands regardless of your decision. I stared at him, trying to process what was happening. Why would you do that? Because I can, he said simply. And because I repay debts. I didn't do anything worth this kind of repayment. You protected what's mine. The possessive way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. I place high value on that. I stood, needing to feel less vulnerable. This is crazy. You don't even know me. I know enough. His eyes followed me as I moved, and I'll learn more, if you accept. The smart thing would be to walk away, to thank him politely for the offer and return to my familiar life of double shifts and mounting bills. But my mother's face flashed in my mind. How she looked the last time I visited, confused and frustrated by her deteriorating condition. How much difference would expert care make? And the money. God, the money would change everything. I need time to think, I said finally. He nodded once. 24 hours. And if I accept? When would I start? Tomorrow. Antonio's current tutor will be informed of the change today. The casual way he dismissed someone else's employment made me hesitate. What about my jobs? I can't just disappear. Your position at Tesoro will be held for you, should you wish to return to it. His tone suggested he found this unlikely. As for your catering work, I assume the compensation I'm offering makes that unnecessary. He was right, of course. $3,000 a week was life-changing money for someone like me. Why English literature? I asked suddenly. Why not math, science, something I might actually be qualified to teach? A shadow of something, amusement, crossed his face. My son doesn't respond well to traditional tutoring methods. His previous tutors have been highly qualified and utterly ineffective. Perhaps a different approach is needed. And you think I have this different approach? I think you have something that caught my son's attention. That's rare enough to be worth exploring. I took a deep breath. May I meet him again, before I decide? Dominic considered this, then nodded. That can be arranged. He's at home today. He checked his watch. Platinum, understated, undoubtedly worth more than my car. I have meetings until 3. After that, I could have you brought to the house. The house. I tried to imagine what kind of home someone like Dominic Castellano would have. A mansion, probably, with staff and security and who knows what else. Okay, I agreed, surprising myself. I'll meet with Antonio today, then I'll give you my answer tomorrow. Good. He moved toward his desk and pressed a button. Almost immediately, the door opened, and Vanessa appeared. Have the car ready for Ms. Foster at 3:30. She'll be joining Antonio and me at the house. Yes, sir. Vanessa's eyes flickered to me with newfound interest before she withdrew. Dominic extended his hand. Until this afternoon, then. I hesitated before taking it. His hand was warm and dry, his grip firm but not overpowering. The brief contact sent an unexpected current up my arm. Until this afternoon, I echoed, withdrawing my hand perhaps too quickly. As Vanessa led me back through the office to the elevator, I felt the weight of eyes following me. Not just Dominic's, but those of his employees, all clearly wondering who I was and why their boss had spent over 20 minutes with me. In the elevator, descending from the rarefied air of the 35th floor back to reality, I leaned against the wall and exhaled shakily. What had I just agreed to consider? Entering the inner circle of a man whose power extended far beyond legitimate business, if even half the rumors were true. And yet, the thought of my mother receiving the best care available, the thought of paying off my debts, finishing my degree without working myself to exhaustion, the thought of seeing Dominic Castellano again, with those intense eyes that seemed to see right through me. The car was waiting outside, the same driver holding the door open with the same impassive expression. Where to, Miss Foster? He asked as I approached. I hesitated. I had 7 hours before I needed to be back here. 7 hours to research Dominic Castellano more thoroughly, to consider what I might be getting myself into. The public library, please, I decided. The driver nodded, closing the door behind me without comment. As the car pulled away from the curb, I watched the Castellano building recede in the window, feeling as though I was being pulled into the orbit of something much larger and more dangerous than I could possibly understand. But for the first time in years, I also felt something else, hope. Dangerous, tempting hope. The Castellano estate sat on 10 acres of prime waterfront property, hidden behind wrought iron gates and a stone wall that stretched so far in either direction that I couldn't see where it ended. As the car passed through the security checkpoint, I caught my first glimpse of the house, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa with terracotta roof tiles and cream-colored walls softened by climbing vines. Wow, I whispered, forgetting myself for a moment. The driver's eyes flickered to mine in the rearview mirror. First time seeing the residence, I nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't make me sound like the awestruck outsider I clearly was. Mr. Castellano prefers classical architecture, he offered. The first personal information he'd volunteered all day. The driveway curved through manicured gardens before opening to a circular motor court centered around a stone fountain. Water cascaded from the hands of a marble goddess, sparkling in the late afternoon sun. 3 other vehicles were parked near the house. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows, a vintage sports car in British racing green, and a practical but clearly expensive sedan. My door opened before we had fully stopped. A different security man stood waiting, this one older with silver at his temples and a face that had seen its share of troubles. Ms. Foster, I'm Raymond, head of residential security. He gestured toward the imposing front entrance. Mr. Castellano is waiting in his study. This way, please. The interior of the house was both grander and more restrained than I'd expected. The soaring ceiling of the entrance hall featured hand-painted scenes from what looked like Greek mythology. The floors were polished marble with inlaid designs. Art pieces that belonged in museums adorned the walls. Yet there was nothing gaudy or ostentatious. Every element spoke of old wealth and refined taste. Raymond led me through the main hall and down a corridor lined with bookshelves. We passed a woman in a gray uniform who nodded respectfully, but watched me with unveiled curiosity. Wait here, please, Raymond said, stopping before a heavy wooden door. He knocked once, opened it without waiting for a response, and announced, "Ms. Foster, sir." "Send her in," came Dominic's voice from within. Raymond stepped aside, and I entered what could only be described as the most beautiful library I'd ever seen. 2 stories of bookshelves stretched toward a coffered ceiling, accessible by a rolling wooden ladder that gleamed with polish. A massive desk occupied one end of the room, while leather chairs and a Chesterfield sofa created a comfortable reading area near a stone fireplace at the other. Dominic stood by one of the tall windows, silhouetted against the late afternoon light. He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, giving him a slightly more approachable appearance. The illusion vanished when he turned, his posture still radiating the same controlled power I'd sensed in his office. "Emily," he said, gesturing me forward. "Thank you for coming. How was your research?" I stopped mid-step. "My research?" "At the library." His expression remained neutral, but there was something knowing in his eyes. "I assume you weren't just catching up on your reading." The realization that he knew where I'd gone after our meeting sent a chill through me. "Did you have me followed?" "No." He crossed to a cabinet and removed a crystal decanter. "The driver reported your destination, as is standard procedure. Would you like a drink? Wine, perhaps, or something stronger?" I shook my head, unsettled by how casually he monitored my movements. "No, thank you." He poured himself what looked like whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. "So, what did you discover in your investigation of me?" I hesitated, weighing honesty against discretion. "Nothing I couldn't have found through common knowledge. Your companies, your philanthropic work, your wife's death 5 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss." Something flickered in his eyes, pain quickly controlled. "Thank you." He took a sip of his drink. "What else?" "The rumors," I admitted reluctantly, "about your family's connections. And nothing definitive. Just speculation. Allegations that never stuck. Cases that were dismissed." I met his gaze directly. "I'm not naive, Mr. Castellano. I know how power works in this city." He studied me for a long moment, then set his glass down. "Antonio is waiting in the garden. I thought you might prefer to speak with him alone first." The change of subject was abrupt, but welcome. I nodded, relieved we weren't going to discuss what we both knew was true about his business dealings. Dominic crossed to the desk and pressed a button. Almost immediately, a woman appeared at the door. Not the one I'd seen in the hallway, but younger, with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Sophia, please take Ms. Foster to Antonio." "Of course, Mr. Castellano." She smiled at me. "This way, miss." Sophia led me through the house to a set of French doors opening onto a stone terrace. Beyond stretched gardens that would have put public botanical displays to shame. "Antonio is at the koi pond," she said, pointing to a path that wound between flowering shrubs. "It's his favorite spot. Just follow the path to the right." I thanked her and stepped into the garden. The scent of roses and lavender filled the air, mingling with the saltier breeze coming off the distant water. I followed the path as directed, turning a corner to find a large pond where brightly colored fish swam lazily beneath lily pads. Antonio sat cross-legged on a stone bench, tossing food pellets to the fish. He wore casual clothes now, jeans and a graphic t-shirt featuring what looked like characters from a video game. Without the formal suit, he looked even younger than I'd first thought. Maybe 9 rather than 11. "Hi, Antonio," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, his dark eyes, so like his father's, widening in recognition. "You're the lady from the restaurant, the one who saved me from getting splashed." I smiled, sitting on the bench beside him. "That's me. I'm Emily. Dad said you might be my new tutor." He studied me with frank curiosity. "Are you a teacher?" "Not exactly," I admitted. "But I like books and writing. Your dad thinks I might be able to help you with your English assignments." He wrinkled his nose. "I hate English. It's boring." "Why boring?" "Because we have to read these old books where nothing happens and then write papers about the deeper meaning and stuff." He rolled his eyes in a perfectly executed preteen expression of disdain. "What kind of books do you like?" I asked. "Comics, graphic novels, Stories where things actually happen. He tossed another pellet to a particularly large orange fish. Dad says those don't count as real reading. I smiled. I think they absolutely count. My brother used to read nothing but graphic novels when he was your age. Antonio perked up. Really? And did he turn out okay? The innocent question caught me off guard. My brother had died in a car accident 3 years ago, another loss that had shaped my family's struggling finances. But Antonio didn't need to know that. He turned out just fine, I said softly. He became an engineer. Antonio considered this. Do you think my dad would let me read graphic novels for school if you told him they were educational? The hopefulness in his voice made me laugh. I can try, but I don't know how persuasive I'll be with your father. He listens more than people think, Antonio said with surprising insight. He just doesn't always agree. That sounds about right. I glanced around the beautiful garden. Do you like living here? Antonio shrugged. It's okay. Kind of lonely sometimes. I'm not allowed to have friends over much because of security stuff. That must be hard. Yeah. He kicked his feet against the bench. My dad worries a lot about bad people trying to hurt us. The simple statement hung in the air, a reminder of the realities of Dominic Castellano's world. I wondered what it was like for this boy, growing up surrounded by wealth and privilege, but also constant security and the shadow of his father's dangerous connections. Hey, do you want to see my treehouse? Antonio asked suddenly, jumping up. Dad had it built last summer. It has electricity and everything. Sure, I agreed, following him down another garden path. The treehouse turned out to be an architectural marvel built around a massive oak tree. More luxury playhouse than rustic hideaway. It featured real windows, a small deck, and a rope ladder alongside a more practical staircase. This is amazing, I said honestly, as Antonio proudly showed me inside. The interior was cozy but well-appointed, with a small desk, comfortable seating, and shelves filled with books and toys. Sometimes I come here to read or play games, Antonio explained. Dad says I can use it whenever I want as long as Raymond or one of the security guys can see the treehouse from their position. I noticed a small camera discreetly positioned in one corner, constant surveillance, even in this childhood sanctuary. What are you reading now? I asked, nodding toward a book lying open on the desk. Oh, that's for school. Romeo and Juliet. He made a face. It's stupid. They both die just because they can't talk to each other properly. I laughed, surprised by his succinct analysis. That's actually a pretty good summary. My teacher says it's a beautiful love story, but I think it's just people making dumb decisions. Maybe it's both, I suggested, picking up the book. The most beautiful stories often involve people making questionable choices. Antonio considered this. I guess, still boring though. What if we acted it out? Made it more like a movie or a play? His eyes lit up. Could we use swords? For the fighting scenes? We'd have to check with your dad about actual swords, I hedged. But we could definitely make it more exciting than just reading it off the page. That would be cool, he admitted. My last tutor just made me read it out loud and answer questions. Well, I'd do things differently. I set the book down. But only if your dad hires me and you want me as your tutor. Antonio studied me thoughtfully. I'd be okay with it. You're not boring like the others. I smiled. High praise. Thank you. And you're not scared of my dad, which is different. The observation startled me. What makes you think I'm not scared of him? Because you look him in the eye when you talk. Most people don't. He shrugged as if this were obvious. Dad says you can tell a lot about people by whether they look you in the eye. Before I could respond to the surprisingly mature insight, a man's voice called from outside. Antonio, your father wants you both to join him for dinner. Antonio sighed. That's Paolo. He's okay, but super strict about schedules. He headed for the door, then turned back. Are you staying for dinner? I don't know. I wasn't expecting to. You should. The food's really good, and maybe Dad will be less serious with you here. The hopeful look in his eyes made it impossible to refuse, even if I'd wanted to. As we walked back toward the house, Antonio slipped his hand into mine with the easy trust of childhood. The gesture caught me off guard, but I squeezed his hand gently, suddenly aware of the responsibility I would be taking on if I accepted Dominic's offer. This wasn't just about tutoring a wealthy man's son for an outrageous salary. It was about entering their world, a world of privilege and danger, of loneliness and luxury, a world where a little boy needed connection as much as he needed education and his father. I glanced up to see Dominic watching us from the terrace, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. What did he truly want from me? And was I prepared for what accepting his offer might mean? Dinner at the Castellano residence was served in a smaller, more intimate dining room than I expected. The table could seat 8, but was set for only 3, with fine china and crystal that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A wall of windows overlooked the illuminated gardens, creating the illusion of dining in a floating glass box above a magical landscape. "I hope you don't mind joining us," Dominic said, as a staff member held my chair. He sat at the head of the table, with Antonio to his right and me to his left. Antonio was quite insistent. "I'm glad to be included," I replied, placing the linen napkin in my lap. The truth was more complicated. I felt out of place in this setting, but fascinated by the glimpse into their private life. "Dad, Emily says graphic novels are real reading," Antonio announced as the first course arrived, a delicate soup that smelled of saffron and seafood. "Her brother read them and became an engineer." Dominic raised an eyebrow, looking at me. "Is that so?" "They can be," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Some graphic novels address complex themes and literary elements, just in a more visual format. They can be a gateway to more traditional literature." Dominic considered this as he tasted his soup. "And you think this would help Antonio's English grades?" "I think engaging with any text critically is valuable. If he enjoys the medium, he's more likely to develop the analytical skills that transfer to required reading." Antonio watched this exchange with naked hope, his spoon forgotten in his hand. "We can discuss this approach further," Dominic conceded, which I suspected was as close to agreement as he typically came in negotiations. "Antonio, eat your soup before it gets cold." The boy grinned triumphantly at me before digging in. I hid my smile behind my water glass, oddly pleased to have scored this small victory. Conversation flowed more easily than I expected during the meal. Antonio talked about school, a private academy with rigorous standards, and his upcoming science fair project. Dominic asked thoughtful questions, demonstrating a deeper engagement with his son's life than I had anticipated. "Emily, Antonio tells me you had innovative ideas for his Shakespeare assignment," Dominic said as the main course arrived. "Perfectly cooked salmon for him and me, pasta for Antonio. Just making it more interactive," I explained. "Performance-based learning can help with comprehension and retention, especially for students who find the language challenging." "She said we could use swords for the fight scenes," Antonio added enthusiastically. Dominic's lips twitched. "Did she?" "I said we'd need to check with you about actual swords," I clarified quickly. "I was thinking more along the lines of foam props. We have a fencing room," Dominic said casually, as if every home naturally included such amenities. "Antonio has had some basic training. Perhaps that could be incorporated, with proper supervision." Antonio's eyes widened. "Really? That would be so cool." I caught the fond look Dominic gave his son, a flash of genuine warmth that softened his entire face before it disappeared behind his usual controlled expression. That brief glimpse of tenderness shifted something in my perception of him. As dinner progressed, I found myself increasingly comfortable in their presence. Antonio was bright and engaging, while Dominic revealed glimpses of dry humor beneath his reserved exterior. By dessert, a delicate panna cotta that melted on the tongue, I had almost forgotten the circumstances that brought me here. "Antonio, it's time for your evening routine," Dominic said as we finished our coffee. "School tomorrow." The boy sighed but didn't argue. "Will Emily be here when I get home?" Dominic looked at me. "That depends on Miss Foster's decision." "I hope you say yes," Antonio said, standing to give his father a quick hug. To my surprise, he came around the table and hugged me as well. "Night, Emily." After he left with Sophia, who had appeared silently to escort him, Dominic rose. "Would you join me on the terrace? We can discuss terms if you've made your decision." The night air carried the scent of jasmine as we stepped outside. Lights illuminated the garden paths, casting soft shadows among the plants. In the distance, I could see the glimmer of the city across the water. "Your home is beautiful," I said, leaning against the stone balustrade. "Thank you." Dominic stood beside me, looking out at the view. He'd loosened his tie further after dinner, and with his jacket off and sleeves rolled up, he seemed less the intimidating businessman and more human. It was my wife's project. She had a talent for creating spaces that felt both impressive and comfortable. The mention of his late wife surprised me. You must miss her very much. His profile remained impassive. Every day, especially for Antonio's sake. He turned to face me. Cancer. It was quick, at least. She didn't suffer long. I'm sorry, I said simply, recognizing the gift of his vulnerability. He nodded once, then changed the subject. Have you decided? I took a deep breath. If I accept, I need certain conditions. Something flickered in his eyes, surprised perhaps that I would negotiate. Go on. First, I need your word that this is truly about tutoring, nothing else. I met his gaze directly. No unexpected duties. His expression hardened slightly. What exactly are you implying, Ms. Foster? Nothing specific, just clarifying expectations. I held my ground. Second, my mother's care needs to be arranged regardless of how long I stay in this position. It can't be contingent on my continued employment. Agreed. He didn't hesitate. What else? I want to finish my degree. That means I'll need some flexibility for classes and exams. He considered this. Reasonable, as long as Antonio's needs are prioritized during critical academic periods. And finally, I continued, surprised by my own boldness, I want the truth about what you really do, beyond the legitimate businesses. If I'm entering your world, even peripherally, I deserve to know what that means. Dominic went very still. The only sound was the distant lapping of water against the shoreline and the soft chirping of night insects. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. That's not something I discuss, even with those closest to me. His eyes never left mine. It protects them as much as it protects me. Then how can I trust you? You can't, not completely, he admitted with surprising candor. But I can give you this. I will never ask you to participate in anything illegal. Your role is exactly as stated, Antonio's tutor, and nothing more. Your background checks will be thorough but discreet. Security protocols will sometimes seem excessive. You will occasionally see or hear things that raise questions. When that happens, the wisest course is not to ask them. It wasn't the transparency I'd asked for, but it was honest in its own way. And if I decline, then we part ways amicably. You return to your life, and Antonio gets yet another tutor who fails to engage him. He paused. And your mother receives the improved care regardless, as I said. I studied him in the dim light, trying to reconcile the dangerous man of reputation with the father who clearly adored his son, the widower who still grieved his wife, the businessman who commanded empires. One last question, I said. Why me, really? There must be qualified tutors who also have good character. Dominic was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Antonio hasn't been the same since his mother died. He's withdrawn, going through the motions. Yesterday in the restaurant was the first time I've seen genuine animation in his eyes in months. He looked away, across the water. And it wasn't just about the wine incident. It was how you spoke to him afterward, like he was a person, not an extension of me. The admission touched something unexpected within me. Children know when they're truly seen. Yes. He turned back to me. So, Ms. Foster, your decision? In that moment, standing on the terrace of a mansion belonging to possibly the most dangerous man in the city, I made a choice that would alter the course of my life. I accept. Dominic nodded once, as if he'd never doubted the outcome. Good. We'll begin tomorrow. The car will pick you up at 7:30. So soon? Why wait? He extended his hand. Welcome to the household, Emily. As our hands met, I felt that same unexpected current pass between us. His grip was firm, his skin warm against mine. I withdrew perhaps a moment too late, conscious of a tension that had nothing to do with our professional arrangement. Raymond will drive you home tonight, Dominic said, releasing my hand. He'll also brief you on basic security protocols. On cue, Raymond appeared at the terrace doors. The car is ready, sir. Dominic walked me through the house to the entrance, where Raymond waited. At the door, he paused. Emily, he said, my name sounding different in his accented voice. Thank you for giving my son a chance. The sincerity in his eyes caught me off guard. I should be thanking you for the opportunity. Perhaps we're both taking a chance. With that cryptic statement, he nodded to Raymond and stepped back. Good night. Good night, Mr. Castellano. Dominic, he corrected. If you're going to be in our home daily, formality seems unnecessary. Good night, Dominic, I amended, testing the name on my tongue. The ghost of a smile touched his lips before he turned away. In the car, Raymond gave me a security briefing that seemed more appropriate for a government official than a tutor. Never post on social media about my work location. Vary my routes when not in the company car. Report any unusual contacts or questions about the family. Memorize emergency numbers. Submit names of visitors to my apartment for background checks. My head was spinning by the time we reached my building. One more thing, Ms. Foster, Raymond said as he opened my door. Mr. Castellano values loyalty above all else. Remember that, and you'll do fine. It sounded like both advice and warning. Inside my apartment, Rachel was curled on our second-hand couch, watching a medical drama. She looked up in surprise. Em, where have you been? I thought you had a shift at Tesoro. I sank down beside her, overwhelmed by the events of the day. You won't believe what happened. As I recounted the story, edited to minimize the more worrying aspects, Rachel's eyes grew progressively wider. Holy shit, she whispered when I finished. You're going to work for Dominic Castellano? The Dominic Castellano. As a tutor, I emphasized. Just a tutor. Right. She gave me a skeptical look. Just a tutor who gets paid more than most executives and has to sign confidentiality agreements. You know what they say about his family. I know, I admitted, but this is about his son and my mother. Rachel's expression softened. The medical care alone is worth it. And I get it. This could change everything for you. Just be careful, okay? Men like that are used to owning everything they touch. Her words echoed in my mind as I prepared for bed. Was I making a terrible mistake? Entering the orbit of a man who clearly lived by different rules than the rest of society? A man who could arrange specialized medical care with a phone call, who had investigated my personal life before even meeting me properly? A man whose touch lingered on my skin hours later. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought of Antonio's hopeful face, and Dominic's rare, genuine smile. Whatever I was walking into, it wasn't as simple as the rumors suggested. There was darkness there, certainly, but also unexpected light. Tomorrow, I would step fully into their world, and nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months into my position as Antonio's tutor, life had fallen into a rhythm I never could have imagined. The Castellano household had become a second home, its routines and peculiarities now familiar. Antonio had blossomed under our unconventional approach to learning. His grades improved dramatically, and more importantly, his enthusiasm for reading had ignited. We'd transformed Romeo and Juliet into an elaborate production with makeshift costumes and foam swords. With Raymond reluctantly drafted to read multiple roles, we'd created graphic novel adaptations of classic literature, constructed historical dioramas, and written original stories inspired by curriculum themes. The boys' creativity, once stifled by traditional methods, now flourished. I'd kept my apartment but rarely slept there. The commute from the city to the estate made more sense to stay in the guest suite Dominic had assigned me for late study sessions. Rachel joked that I'd been absorbed by the Castellano world. She wasn't entirely wrong. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the study, where Antonio and I were working on his final project for the semester, a literary analysis presented as a mock podcast. So if I compare the themes in Frankenstein to modern issues like AI ethics, that shows deeper understanding, right? Antonio asked, looking up from his notes. Exactly, I confirmed, impressed by his insight. At just 10 years old, he was making connections many high school students missed. That's the kind of critical thinking that moves beyond just summarizing the plot. Dad's going to be so impressed, he grinned, scribbling another note. He still talks about that essay you helped me with last month. The mention of Dominic sent a familiar warmth through me. Our relationship had evolved in ways I hadn't anticipated. Professional respect had grown into friendship, and recently, something more that neither of us had named but both acknowledged in lingering glances and conversations that stretched late into the night after Antonio was asleep. "Speaking of your father," I said, checking my watch, "he wanted to meet with us at 11 to discuss summer plans." Antonio nodded, gathering his materials. "I hope he'll agree to the Shakespeare camp I mentioned. It would be perfect for our Julius Caesar unit." We made our way to Dominic's study, passing household staff who now greeted me with genuine smiles rather than curious glances. At the door, Raymond nodded to us before knocking. "Enter," came Dominic's voice. He sat behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, but his eyes immediately found mine as we walked in. He held up one finger, indicating he'd be just a moment. "That's not acceptable, Marco," he said into the phone, his tone carrying that quiet danger I'd come to recognize. The agreement was clear. If he's reconsidering, remind him what happened to Valles when he had similar doubts. I guided Antonio to the sitting area, trying not to listen to what was clearly business I shouldn't know about. This was the dance we'd perfected. My presence in the household meant I occasionally glimpsed the edges of Dominic's other world, but I never asked questions, and he maintained careful boundaries. "My apologies," Dominic said after ending the call. He joined us, sitting across from Antonio. "Business complications. Is everything okay?" I asked carefully. "It will be." His eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary. "Now, about this summer program Antonio's been lobbying for." The meeting progressed normally, with Antonio presenting his case for the Shakespeare Youth Program with all the persuasive techniques I'd taught him. Dominic listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about curriculum and security arrangements. "The residential component concerns me," he said finally. 2 weeks is a long time. "Dad, Emily already said she'd be there as a volunteer instructor," Antonio argued. "And you could have Raymond check the place out first." Dominic raised an eyebrow at me. "You didn't mention you'd volunteered." Antonio was getting ahead of himself, I explained. "I said I'd consider it if you approved the program." Dominic studied his son, then me. "Let me review the security options. We'll discuss it further." Antonio recognized this as the tentative victory it was and beamed. "Thanks, Dad. Can I go tell Sophia about my project idea?" She said she wanted to hear it. After Dominic nodded his permission, Antonio bounded from the room with the exuberance of a child who'd rediscovered joy. When the door closed behind him, Dominic's professional demeanor softened. "You've worked miracles with him," he said, moving to sit beside me on the sofa. "His teachers can't stop raving about the transformation. He's a brilliant kid. He just needed someone to connect with his interests. It's more than that." Dominic's voice lowered. "He trusts you. And so do I." The atmosphere between us shifted, charged with the tension we'd been navigating for months. His proximity made my pulse quicken, a reaction I'd stopped trying to fight. "Dominic," I began, uncertain what I even wanted to say. His phone rang, the harsh sound shattering the moment. He checked the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. We'll continue our conversation later?" I nodded, rising to give him privacy. As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. "Emily, dinner tonight? Just the two of us, after Antonio's asleep." The implication was clear. This would be different from our usual evening discussions. This would acknowledge what had been building between us. "Yes," I said simply, and closed the door behind me. I spent the afternoon helping Antonio refine his project, but my mind kept drifting to the evening ahead. By the time I returned to my suite to prepare for dinner, nervous energy had me pacing the floor. I chose a simple black dress I'd bought during a rare shopping trip with the generous income that had transformed my finances. My mother was now receiving the best care available. My student loans were paid off. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't living on the edge of financial disaster. A soft knock at my door surprised me. When I opened it, Sophia stood there with a long, flat box. "Mr. Castellano asked me to deliver this," she said with a knowing smile. Inside was a stunning silk wrap in deep emerald. The card simply read, "The terrace can be cool in the evening." The intimacy of the gesture, him anticipating my needs, sent a pleasant shiver through me. At 8 o'clock precisely, Raymond escorted me to a part of the estate I'd never visited, a small private dining terrace overlooking the water. Lanterns cast a golden glow over a beautifully set table for two. Dominic stood waiting, more casually dressed than I'd ever seen him, in dark slacks and a charcoal button-down with the sleeves rolled up. "You look beautiful," he said simply, coming forward to take my hand. "Thank you for the wrap," I replied, suddenly shy. "It's lovely. It matches your eyes." He guided me to the table, where wine already waited in crystal glasses. As we dined on expertly prepared seafood, our conversation flowed easily, discussing Antonio's progress, books we'd both read, my nearly completed business degree. Yet beneath the familiar topics ran an undercurrent of anticipation, of boundaries about to be crossed. After dessert, Dominic refilled our glasses and moved his chair closer to mine. "I've been thinking about your contract." My heart sank. Was this an elaborate setup to end my employment? Is there a problem? The opposite. His eyes held mine. "It's been 6 months. Antonio has exceeded all expectations. Your initial agreement is coming to its term." "Oh." I set down my glass carefully. "Are you offering an extension?" "I'm offering something different." Dominic reached for my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. "These months having you in our home, in our lives, Emily, you must know how I've come to feel about you." My pulse raced. "I think I do." "I've tried to maintain professional boundaries," he continued, "but I find myself thinking of you constantly. Not as Antonio's tutor, but as the woman who brought light back into this house, into our lives." "Dominic." "Let me finish." His hand tightened on mine. "I know who I am. What I am. The complications my life brings. I wouldn't ask you to share that burden without understanding exactly what you'd be accepting." The moment hung between us, his offer to finally reveal the truth of his world. The answer to the question I'd stopped asking months ago. "I don't need to know," I said quietly. "I see who you are with your son, how you treat those under your protection." That tells me enough. Something powerful flashed in his eyes. "You understand what you're saying? The implications?" "I do." And I meant it. The man I'd come to know was complex, capable of ruthlessness in business, certainly, but also of profound loyalty and unexpected tenderness. I'd witnessed both sides and had made my peace with the contradiction. Dominic stood, drawing me to my feet. "Then let me ask properly. Stay. Not as Antonio's tutor, though he would be devastated to lose you in that capacity. Stay as more. As mine." He stepped closer, one hand rising to cup my cheek. "I've wanted to do this for months," he murmured, before his lips found mine. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that had been building since that first day in the restaurant. His arms encircled me, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest. I responded with equal fervor, months of denied attraction finally finding release. When we broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," I whispered, "but there's Antonio to consider. This changes everything. He adores you already," Dominic said with certainty, "but we'll be careful. Take things slowly where he's concerned." A commotion from the main house interrupted the moment. Raised voices, running footsteps. Dominic tensed, pushing me slightly behind him as Raymond appeared at the terrace entrance. "Sir," Raymond said urgently, "we have a situation." Moretti's men were spotted at the perimeter. Dominic's expression hardened instantly, the lover vanishing behind the calculating boss. "Secure Antonio. Full lockdown protocol. Already done, sir. Take Emily to the safe room," Dominic instructed, pulling out his phone. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not hiding while you and Antonio might be in danger." Dominic gave me a sharp look. "This isn't a discussion. You just asked me to be part of your life," I reminded him. "This is part of it." "I'm going to Antonio." Something shifted in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, mingled with concern. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Stay with Raymond. Follow his instructions exactly." As we moved swiftly through the house, security personnel swarmed around us, weapons visible now rather than discreetly hidden. We found Antonio in his bedroom, Sophia sitting calmly beside him, reading as if nothing was amiss, though her tight expression betrayed her concern. "Emily!" Antonio cried when I entered, jumping up to hug me tightly. "Raymond said we have to stay inside because of bad men," Just a precaution, I soothed, meeting Sophia's worried eyes over his head. For 2 tense hours, we remained in Antonio's room, transformed into a fortress with reinforced doors and windows. I distracted him with games and stories while security reports came in through Raymond's earpiece. Finally, the all-clear came. Dominic appeared in the doorway, his expression grim but controlled. "Everything's resolved," he said, his eyes finding mine with a message I understood. This was the reality of his world, the danger that occasionally touched their lives. "Dad, are the bad men gone?" Antonio asked, rushing to his father. Dominic knelt to embrace his son. "They're gone. You're safe. I promised I would always protect you, remember?" Over Antonio's head, Dominic's eyes met mine, questioning, giving me one last chance to reconsider now that I'd glimpsed the darker aspects of their life. I moved forward, placing my hand on Antonio's shoulder and the other on Dominic's arm, completing the circle. "We're all safe," I said firmly. "That's what matters." Later that night, after Antonio had finally fallen asleep, Dominic found me in the library. "Still certain?" he asked quietly. "After tonight?" I crossed to him without hesitation. "More certain. You protect what's yours, and now that includes me." He pulled me close, his arms strong around me. "Always," he promised against my hair. "No matter what comes." And in that moment, surrounded by the strength of his embrace and the knowledge of the challenges ahead, I knew I'd made my choice. This complex, dangerous, fiercely loyal man and his son had become my world, my family. Whatever storms came, we would weather them together. I had entered the devil's protection, but found something unexpected there, a home,